Okay, let us get started. Okay, so today should be fun. Today we're going to talk about deal structuring. All right. So the simplest of all deal structures is ignore what we've got up here on the screen, ignore what you got in front of you, but the simplest of all deal structures is you go out, you buy a property, you pay cash for it, and then you own it free and clear, by yourself, collect whatever rents you can. Obviously you keep all the money and you deal with whatever taxes you've got and that sort of thing. And that's the simplest of all deal structures, okay? The next simplest of all deal structures is you put in a down payment, you borrow some money from a traditional lender, you pay them back at whatever rate that they require, you keep basically everything beyond what you pay them, and that is your, deal structure, okay? Then the next is kind of what's on paper and up on the screen, okay, in terms of complexity. This is where you're going to have a loan on the property from, let's say, a traditional lender, but you're going to have, let's say, two parties to the deal structure, one being the developer, one being an investor partner, okay? And this is probably the most common, okay? Especially for starting developers and that sort of thing, where you as a starting developer may not have a lot of cash, but you may have the time, you may have the expertise, you may have the connections, whatever else that you may need to be able to actually do the deal, put it together, make it work, get it built, get it occupied, and so forth. But your business partner, the investor, doesn't really want to have to deal with any of that stuff. They wanted to simply give you money, you go take care of it, you go deal with it, but the question is then, all right, given that sort of relationship, who gets paid? When do they get paid? How much do they get paid? Is there going to be a preference on how much they get paid and when they get paid? Okay, you're starting to begin to see the picture, yes? Okay, then you get a bit more complex and you start adding in additional investors or additional developer partners. Okay, and you can literally make this as complex as your imagination would allow you to make it, okay? That many larger scale developers will typically give the developer managers like a piece of the action whenever they're doing this big development. They'll give them a certain piece of the action because it incentivizes them to do a good job and to make sure the project is as profitable as it can be. You can also have situations of where you get the architect some sort of buy-in on the deal as well, and you sort of say, we want you as the architect to make this property as energy efficient as possible, to have the lowest overall upfront cost, but ultimately just give us everything, but in return we'll give you a percentage of the savings on the utility bills. We'll also give you a percentage of the sale whenever the property sells at some point in the future, okay? My point with this, okay, if I deliver nothing else in terms of you trying to understand this whole notion of deal structure, is pretty much anything's possible, okay? It's a question of then what's more probable in terms of what kind of relationship are you going to have as a developer with your partners, and who those partners are, what they bring to the table, how they should be compensated, when they should be compensated. Okay, so with that relatively generic setup, I want to start with some questions that you guys have, and then we'll get to the numbers and explaining the actual handout and the spreadsheet. So, questions about deal structure stuff. Oh, come on. This has got to be one of the most important and probably interesting topics as it relates to development, because this is really how you make your money. Pure and simple. So you either understand it or you don't. And if you don't want to understand it, don't ask questions. Okay.
So whenever, something I've seen a couple of times, but not all the way through, is we've approached, or I've been told to approach in practice, like a landowner, right?
Yep.
We've got the perspective, right, for pulling in the development. They've got the land, right? So when there's, what do you call that in terms of structure? So you've got three parties, right? People pulling two parties together, right? The developer and the landowner. The landowner's gonna donate his land into the
Right into the deal. Yep. Yep.
And the third party are pulling it together.
Right.
What is that called?
Doesn't be called anything. I mean, it's just simply a joint venture. You know, each person is bringing something different to the party, but what has to be negotiated is, well, once again, how much do they bring to the party? You know, either money or property or experience or connections or whatever, and how do you put a value on that in terms of their contribution into the deal, and then subsequent to whatever that contribution is, then how are they going to get paid? Are they going to get paid off of the operating cash flows at all, or are they going to all get paid or partially get paid at the end of the deal whenever the property is sold or revalued? So the point that you described is not an uncommon one. Where, as I said, you have the one person, they bring the property into the deal. That's all they bring. They bring nothing else. They have no expertise, no knowledge, nothing. They just happen to be land rich, and they bring that to the table, and their whole participation is pretty much just sitting back and watching cash flows come in, okay? But then you have the developer who's the one putting everything together, finding all the people that can make everything happen, finding other sources of capital that may be needed to be able to make the deal happen, hiring all the different people that are going to need to design the project, to build the project, to finding who the people are that are going to finance it, and so forth, so on.
So in these situations, you'll have like a managing partner that could possibly have a managing type compensation yearly, and then kind of a general.
Yeah, you can have a managing partner who basically makes all the decisions, and then you have the other partners, or more silent partners, that basically, once again, are just contributing money but really have no say-so whatsoever in the deal. They're given some relatively specific guidelines as to how it's going to be set up, and once again, who is going to be paid, how they're going to be paid, when they're going to be paid, what it's going to be based on, that sort of thing. But as far as the decision-making that takes place on the actual project itself, for the most part, they're going to be left out of all of that.
No voting rights type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, once again, it can be structured differently.
Right.
But as a general rule, a lot of those people, they have no business getting involved in the development side of the deal. They are strictly wealthy individuals or people with a lot of cash that are simply looking for somewhere to park some money for a period of time, and they think this is a good idea, and they're trusting the developer to do a good job because they have either a track record, reputation, connection, whatever it might be.
So in this kind of specific deal structure, I saw the managing partners getting paid through the pile of cash, and I guess in the pro forma it was from the income of the building. The pile of cash runs out, and they end up drawing for the management fee non-cash compensation. So would you say that creates a disincentive for performance, because now they're owning more and more to just that structure in itself?
Yeah, this is what up front, before the project takes place in any way, shape, form, or fashion, you have to come to terms with what the deal structure is going to be. Whether it's a simple one, whether it's a complex one, once again, I'm not trying to gloss it over, but it's all about what do you contribute into the deal? When do you get paid? How much do you get paid? Under what conditions do you get paid? And so you've got to be very careful to make sure that that deal structure is set and sound and everyone is comfortable with it, and that there literally is very little room for misunderstanding or, you know, wiggle room, you know, with how that all takes place. And, you know, so you have to try to figure in how can you build in incentives for the developer to do a good job? How can you build in incentives for the project to be finished early or on time or under budget or under schedule? You know, how can you build in incentives that the value that is there, whether it's a year after it's opened or 5 years after it's opened, is there, and then be able to reward the people who actually have an influence, you know, on that. Now, I think, you know, what you'll find is, yeah, there are those investors with a lot of money that do want to get involved in the day-to-day decisions and that sort of thing, but many of them, that's not the case. They happen to be, you know, maybe they're medical doctors. You know, they're bringing in a pile of cash from whatever their, you know, medical profession is. They know nothing about business. They just simply have an extra $500,000 a year laying around to be able to plow into whatever they want to, okay? And so they happen to trust somebody with that money. You know, they do one development deal, it's a success, and that's a success. Then they plow in some more money with them on another deal. You know, I mean, it's sometimes that simple. And so, you know, it's just a question of, once again, how do you know, go about putting it together? And that's part of what we're going to talk about it, and then ultimately who gets paid, when they get paid, and how much they get paid. Okay. Yep. Awesome.
How do you value your experience base? Like, what type of margin do you put on that?
A lot. And I'm being honest whenever I say that, because you don't want to undervalue what you bring to the table with these sorts of things. Just because you don't have cash doesn't mean you don't have value, you know, as it relates to, you know, doing this sort of thing. Now, it could also be you don't have value either, in the sense that you really don't know what you're doing and you're going to lose everybody all their money. But assuming that you actually do know what you're doing and you do have the talents and the skills to be able to put everybody together and put everything together and make the project work and that sort of thing, then, you know, you've got to figure out, you know, to a certain extent, maybe back into what you think your time is worth and how much time you're going to be spending on this, and, you know, what the payoff is going to be. Because, you know, you don't want to set up a situation of where you're going to be spending 80 hours a week for 12 months and you're going to walk away with 20 grand. You know, you'd probably be pretty unhappy about that. But, you know, as to what dollar amount is appropriate, you know, that's just something that, you know, you're going to have to kind of probably figure out a little bit over time. But it's also a negotiation, you know, because your money partner may say, well, I'm providing all the money, all you're doing is providing the expertise. Well, if that's their attitude, you may not want to be partnering with them, okay? Because if that's their attitude, then they should just do it themselves. You know, but you know, the reality is you're probably going to bring a lot more to the table than you maybe think you do in terms of sometimes structuring these deals. But it's surprising to me over the years how many people I have met with big pockets of money that are just looking for a place to park that money.
Where are
Okay, you know, I mean, there are people, everything from, you know, people who have inherited the money to people who have gotten lucky, you know, through, you know, whether it's a lawsuit settlement, whether it's winning the lottery, through, you know, just random things, divorces, to, you know, life insurance payouts, to, you know, whatever it might be. But they've got a pocket, you know, full of cash that they're just looking to potentially, you know, do some sort of a development, but they have no idea how to do it, even where to begin. Okay.
And can you structure a deal like this with a private entity as well as a conventional mortgage?
Absolutely.
And how would that?
Well, I mean, this actually does incorporate a mortgage into it.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Other just general questions before we jump into the model itself.
So when you're doing the land valuation, I'm trying to figure out the common price of something.
Well, you would simply find, You get an independent third-party appraiser to value the land, okay, that has no vested interest in the deal whatsoever, and if everybody's comfortable with that third-party valuation, that's their equity contribution. Now, if more than one party is unsatisfied that that value is too high or it's too low or whatever, then you get another valuation that's independent and see, where it comes, and then you come to a consensus or you don't, because I've seen that happen as well, that where you have somebody that they think their land is worth 2 or 3 times what it actually is worth, okay? For whatever reasons, either based on what they paid for it, or how long they held it, or what other people have told them, or whatever, that has no basis whatsoever in reality. Okay, just because they paid $1 million for it, 6 months ago, does not mean that it really is truly worth $6 million today. It could be worth half that. It could be worth twice that. It totally depends on what the market will justify.
So then like the developer side, the way that they justify their piece of the deal, are they doing it based on pro forma?
Well, usually you can set up to where you're going to charge a development fee, okay, like a fee for service, okay, and you're a consultant. And then you would potentially get a monthly draw on the deal that would compensate you for your living expenses and time and whatever else. And then you also would potentially then get some upside based on how the project performs, both on an operating cash flow as well as on the reversion or the sale or the revaluation of the project at some point in the future.
Like the 20 and 2 structure.
Yeah, there's once again, a whole variety of ways of setting that up, okay? Somebody over here, I thought I had a comment, question, observation. Okay, anybody else? Questions?
Typically, when would the payout be?
Totally depends. I mean, the normal scenario we're kind of sort of looking at is the property, once the property is built, once the property is occupied, and it's generating net operating income, then you would say, all right, we're going to now pay out a portion of that net operating income to the developer, to the investors, whoever else it might be, above and beyond. Once you've covered all of your costs, you've covered all your debt service, so whatever money's left over, then simply gets dispersed to those, interested parties, okay? Then, at some point, once again, depending on the deal structure, if there's a sale that's going to be involved that you might say 5 years into the future, we all agree that we're going to sell the property, and whatever the proceeds are, we're going to distribute it, accordingly. Or in 5 years, we're going to have an independent third-party valuation done on the property, and based upon what that value estimate is, then we will effectively allow each other to buy out, somebody else within the deal, or we'll sell it, or refinance it, or something else.
So if there's 500 condos tied,
Right.
you may want to say 75% of all need to be sold.
It's
Or
whatever
100%
whatever metrics that everyone is comfortable with, to ensure that you're getting the incentives set up in a way that's going to be mutually beneficial for everybody involved. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, anybody else?
All I know is about the land, what you're trying to do, landowners do not like doing deals like that. If you probably haven't figured it out, because the people that used to come to my partners, they're like, we're putting all the equity in, what are you putting in? You figure it out and come back, but we're not putting all of our land in for you to profit.
I would agree with that.
I never really understood it, but I understand it.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, especially when it's like land that has been in a family-owned situation for an extended period of time, there's all emotional sort of baggage that goes along with it, and people get all wrapped up in that, and as I said, that they have a misperception of what it's actually worth. And you sometimes just have to move on to the next deal because this is not worth fighting over those circumstances. And sadly enough, I mean, I'm not trying to be what's the word? I can't think of the word, but sometimes you have to wait for people to die. You know, I mean, I'm trying to think of the right word to use, but basically not to be morbid, but you know, but that, unfortunately, in some circumstances, you have somebody that has owned something their entire life, and they have a value that's up here, and that's never, ever, 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 ever going to be met. You know, and so at some point they do die, and then ultimately their heirs are able to, you know, probably a bit more reasonable. Yep.
In your like professional experience, what kind of backgrounds have a lot of the developers you've met come from that are just doing pure consulting?
It's everything. I mean, honestly, the one thing that is probably most common is they're always going to have a strong familiarity with the numbers on the side of the deal. I mean, they can have a good, strong design background, they can have a good, strong construction background, they can have a good, strong, you know, just general business background, but they always, always, always have a strong command of the numbers. Because at the end of the day, that's really what matters, you know, and they've got to understand that. They've got to understand the market, but they've got to understand what, you know, how this property makes money, or how it's going to lose money, or how it's going to be financed, or not. And so, you know, the backgrounds, you know, can be extremely varied, and in terms of education level can be extremely varied. But, you know, there are, you know, different skill sets that get brought to the table by each of these people. You know, and everybody takes a little bit of a different approach, you know, to like how one person deals with a city government, a developer that is, and another person deals with that same city government can be two drastically different approaches. Both could be successful, neither could be successful, one could be successful, the other one isn't, you know, for different reasons, you know, and, you know, it's what I'm saying, that each person brings, you know, hopefully something a little bit different to the table that hopefully is a valuable contribution. But as far as like a specific set of backgrounds, you know, there really isn't one that I've seen. It's just like it's all over the map. Okay, somebody over here had a question. Mr. Johnson, do you have a question?
I was just gonna say it's kind of analogous to like you talked about the people's value that they put on it based off of their, you know, it's like the person who brings their grandmother's chamber pot to the village roadshow, and then they, you know, it's worth $25 instead of
Right.
$25,000. They were heartbroken because it's not just that they, you know, they've held this thing for all this time. It's been a part of the family. And I imagine a lot of times when they in a deal when you're trying to get some heirloom land like that people artificially add their.
Yeah, and there's, I think, a really important lesson, you know, and someone told me a long time ago, and I think it's very, very true, you know, don't get emotionally attached or connected to your project. It's easy to say, hard to do, okay? You know, once you have started on something and you're, you know, knee-deep and working through everything on that project, and you're potentially, you know, you're fooling yourself into the project is going to be really successful, but the reality, you know, all the handwritings on the wall that maybe it's not going to be successful, but yet you're still convinced it's somehow going to be successful. You know, it's much easier if you can, to a certain extent, detach from that and just simply, you know, say, okay, I am not in love with this building. I am not in love with this project. It is strictly bricks and mortar, you know, and, you know, kind of move past it once you get in it. You know, one of the first projects I did, I mean, I did very well with it, but I did fall in love with that project and did, you know, and it was just like, it got very emotional because, you know, I was just like, whenever I would have prospective buyers come in and they would say, well, you know, I don't know if I would have done something this way, you know, designed it this way or you know, set it this way. I'd be like, no sale for you, you know. And, you know, how dare you come in and potentially change my, you know, layout and design, you know. But then you're just kind of like, okay, no, gotta back away, you know, it's just, you know, bricks and mortar. But it's weird, but stuff like that will, you know, and especially any sort of design elements, those of you with design backgrounds, you know you have invested a certain amount of time, energy, effort, and skill into doing whatever it is that you've done for usually very specific reasons, and then to see someone subsequent to that come in and all of a sudden rip out, you know, of things that you were literally in love with that were features about the building, it will just drive you insane, you know, so.
Professor, did you see the movie Descendant with George Clooney? That's a great movie. It's all about real estate and families. Really good movie.
No, I don't think I have.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
Okay. All right, any other thoughts, comments, observations?
What project was your first project?
It was a 2-story building in downtown Bryan, Texas. It was originally a saloon and a whorehouse. And it,
Courthouse?
whorehouse. Yes, a house of prostitution. It was built in 1890.
Wow.
It's,
Is it historic preservation?
yeah, it backed up to the railroad tracks, so you could hop off the railroad and literally walk in the door. It still actually, to this day, still has the words saloon and inked on the back of the building on the above the second story, original. It was also during Bonnie and Clyde's raids, or their whole, it was a jewelry store that they basically robbed at one point. It was also, well, while it was a saloon, the downstairs was a saloon, the upstairs, of course, was a whorehouse. The downstairs, it was the Knox Brothers Saloon, and basically one of the early stories was that some guy got really drunk and like rode his horse through the saloon and did all kinds of crazy damage, shooting it up and whatnot. It's like 4.5 miles away from Texas A&M, and so all kinds of strange, crazy stuff occurred there. But whenever I bought the building back, I guess late 90s, or I guess late, somewhere around there, that it had been empty for several years, but had gone through a whole myriad of uses, and so it was just pretty much a blank floor plate, because it also had burned at one point in time. So it had a brand new, sort of, basically nothing on the inside was really original, I guess is probably the only. So it was, yeah, it had a lot of interesting circumstances around it. But what I did was I took and redeveloped the downstairs into office space, and then the second floor into loft apartments, and lived there for several years, and part of it, and rented out obviously the rest of the building.
How'd you get the capital for that?
Basically, what I did at that particular point in time, I cashed in part of my retirement and took a couple $100,000 out of that and used toward basically paying for everything up front and being able to do what I wanted to do, because at that particular point in time, it was in an area of town that was not receiving a lot of love for all intents and purposes, and it predated all of the sort of the redevelopment activity that took place down there. Myself and one other person were the only 2 people living and redeveloping in the downtown area at the time. Now, there's probably 50 different projects, and that have all been done or in process in one way or another. And it was so funny, just it was a random story, but probably some of my favorite moments, because there were only a couple of us doing this. This is once again 20-something years ago, back when I was obviously much younger, and was getting on top of our respective buildings, and we both built potato guns, and then shooting the potato guns in each other's buildings in the middle of the night, and anyway, memory lane. Okay, but you asked. All right, now, okay, so let's take a look at what we've got here, unless you've got any other questions on the deal structure stuff, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, so here, what we've done, we built a relatively simple little spreadsheet. All right, and so we've got a property, and we're saying, all right, we bought it for $1 million. We're expecting to sell it at the end of year 5 for $1.1 million. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward stuff. We're going to get a loan on the property. It's going to be an 80% loan to value ratio. And then the interest rate on the debt on that loan is going to be 5%. Now, one caveat with this particular model on purpose, to keep things relatively simple, understandable, and that sort of thing, relatable, it is an interest-only loan or interest-only mortgage. Okay, so there's no amortization, There's no, basically loan balance other than obviously the original, well, the original principal, because obviously the balance is not going to decrease because you're not paying off the loan. Okay?
Sorry, there's nothing.
All right? So if 80%, and obviously in this model, all the yellow cells are the inputs, and then the white cells are, in essence, the outputs. So if you have 80% debt or 80% loan-to-value ratio, then the remaining 20% is going to be your equity. Okay? So everything up to this point, there shouldn't be anything that you have not seen before. So from this point forward is where everything begins to kind of be new. All right, so you take that 20% equity, and I purposely indented here because now this is where you split up who contributes what to that equity. So what is happening is of that 20% equity, 15% is coming from the developer. The remaining 85% is coming from the investor partner. Does that make sense? Okay, now we can actually pop up dollar amounts if we need to, just to kind of make sure that everybody's, so if we've got 1 million, and we're saying that 20% of that is equity, that's 200,000, okay? But of that, okay, the developer portion is 15%, so it'll be 30,000, right? Okay. And then the remaining 170,000 would be the investor's equity. Okay, does that make sense, everybody? Yes or no? Okay. All right. So we kind of scroll up a little bit. Okay, so the last little input that we have for this portion of the model is what is our projected annual net operating income for the property, and then based on that, we're going to calculate our before-tax cash flow, taking into account whatever our annual debt service is. Well, our annual debt service, okay, we are borrowing $800,000, yes? Well, our interest rate on that is 5%. So that means our annual interest expense for debt service is going to be the $40,000. Okay? Everybody still with me? Yes, no, possibly could be. Okay. So, we take just simply our annual projected NOI, subtract out our debt service, get the before-tax cash flow, okay? So that's the amount that then, in essence, is probably going to be somewhat distributable. We'll talk about that here in this next little piece. So, a new word for some of you, or two words. How many have ever heard this before? Parapursuit. Not tiramisu, but parapursuit, okay? All right, so like 4 people, all right? Parapursuit, in essence, means whatever you put in, you get out. This is one way to sort of look at it. In other words, whatever percentage that you put in, you get out. All right, so if you put in 5% equity, then you're going to get 5% equity out whenever the deal closes, okay? But what you're going to find is that all deals are not going to be that way, okay? That just because you put in a certain percentage doesn't mean you're going to get out that certain percentage, okay? You make it something other than parapursuit, okay? All right, but in this example, that $20,000 of before-tax cash flow, what we're saying is if it's parapursuit, the developer put in what percentage of the equity? 15%. That's $3,000 that they would then get out of the before-tax cash flow based upon that contribution level. Does that make sense? Yes or no? Okay. But that also means that the investor partner, they put in how much?
85.
Okay, but they put in 85%. So of the 20,000, they would get 17,000. Okay? Everybody cool with that? No questions at this point? Again, that's pretty straightforward. Okay. Now then, same thing on the sale proceeds, okay? So here is where we've got to sort of figure out, well, what are the actual sale proceeds going to be for this property, all right? Now if we total these two up, let's just add those two up just for a second. Okay, now, where is that 300 coming from? Because take a look up here just for a second. Okay, we're buying the property for $1 million and we're selling it for 1.1 million. That's only a difference of $100,000. Sorry, what?
It's about mortgage balance.
Okay, or it's not necessarily the mortgage.
Equity.
Equity.
It's the equity. Don't forget the equity, okay, we're putting into this. So think about how we're going to come up with that dollar amount. Click on the cells, see where it's coming from. All right? Take a look at what's happening here. You've got cell C4. What is cell C4?
Sales hours.
Okay, projected sales price. That's the 1.1 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's just write this down on the board. So we start off with the 1.1 million. Okay, and the next thing we do is we subtract out C6 times C3. Okay, what's C6?
80%.
The loan to value. Okay, so it's 80% times C3, which was what? The initial purchase price of 1 million. Okay, so what we've got is 1.1 million minus 800,000, which gives us 300,000. Does that make sense, everybody? Yes or no? Okay? So that's where the 300,000 is coming from. Okay? All right? Now, then the annual and overall project distributions are as follows. All right? If we go back, the initial investment, equity investment of the developer was 30,000. Okay? Of the overall 200,000 equity,
Yeah.
the remaining 170,000 or 85% of the equity is from the investor. Okay, so obviously developer plus investor equals total project. Okay, just to make sure that you're following the logic. All right, then for years 1 through 4, we've got the respective cash flows, their respective percentage of the before tax cash flows that they're receiving each of those years, okay, that we've already worked out. $3,000 a year for the developer, $17,000 a year for the investor. Okay, everybody cool with that, yes or no? Okay. Then, in the final year, we have the year 5 plus whatever their respective reversion is. Well, the reversion is basically whatever this dollar amount is here is their portion of the reversion. So in the case of the developer, you have 45,000 plus the 3,000 of the operating cash flow for that year. Is everybody cool with that? Okay, same exact thing for the investor. For the investor, their reversion is going to be the 255,000 plus the 17,000. Does everybody see that? Okay, and then overall, for the project combined, you get the initial equity for the whole project, the overall before tax cash flows for each of the years, and then the total reversion of the 300,000 plus the 20,000 before tax cash flow for the project. Everybody cool with that? Now, because it's pari passu, then the before tax internal rate of return, all you're doing here is you're simply putting in these elements as your cash flows, solving for internal rate of return, and it's going to be identical all the way across. So in other words, everybody's putting in the same, or I'm sorry, everybody's getting out a relative return to what they have put in. Okay? Is everybody cool with that? Now, chances are, no investor is going to have a problem with that. Because the developer's basically putting in the same percentage, or they're getting out the same relative return as the investor, but yet the investor doesn't really do anything. The developer's having to do all the work, so who's going to be unhappy in this arrangement? Probably the developer, because they're saying, I'm putting all this time and effort and energy in, and I'm putting in a cash contribution, and I'm getting the same return as they are without getting any real benefit for all the time and effort and energy I put into this deal. Does that make sense? Okay, so they're going to be unhappy. So that's where then you're going to begin to say, okay, maybe we shouldn't structure this as a pari passu sort of situation and go to a modified structure. Okay, Mr. Johnson.
So in the pari passu, in this particular thing, so the investor didn't get interest on his loan. This is not a loan. Does he get interest on his loan?
No, it is not a loan.
Yeah.
This is simply the investor is putting in equity.
Okay. Yeah, so some other partners you grab, they
Right.
give you back, and they put in money, you do the work, they put in more money so they don't have to do any work.
Right.
But they get some rate of return.
Right. Yeah, and because what can happen in a lot of cases is that once again, you have a source of capital that is, once again, a high net worth individual, and maybe their only restriction to you is, I want a 12% return on whatever money I give you over whatever period I give you. I want a 12% return. Give me my 12% return. And as long as you give me my 12% return, I don't want a penny more, I don't want a penny less. You give me my 12% return, and I'll leave you alone. You do whatever you want to do. And that, in a lot of ways, is how many of these sort of deals are sort of structured, is that you simply have, this third-party investor that is just simply looking for a fixed rate of return on whatever it is that they are providing you, but yet, once again, they're giving you some guidance on how quickly they want that money back, how much, how often, and whether or not they want to be involved or not. Okay, make sense? Okay, any other questions? All right. So now we move up. Okay, and with this one, we're going to make a couple of little changes here. But this one, now we have this new line, or actually a couple of new lines. We have a preferred return that we give to an investor partner. This is kind of where you sort of get into, we want a certain percentage rate of return each and every year, okay? And so you pop that in and then see what sort of impact it has. Well, first of all, regret this, but yes. Okay. So let's just say, for a moment, we get rid of the leftover distribution. We give that to the developer here for a moment, all right? And we go up here to this preferred return, and we type in something like 10%. Okay? So here's what and I did that on purpose so you can see the math at work. By giving a preferred return to the investor partner, off of the top of whatever money is being generated on this, they are getting their 10% rate of return, and then everything from that waterfalls down below. So with that 10% rate of return, that is going to be based upon what their contribution was in terms of their equity. So 170,000 was what they contributed to the deal. a 10% preferred return means they're gonna get $17,000 a year over the life of that project. Does that make sense? Yes, no, possibly could be.
And you get it first.
And they get it first, okay? Once they are, now here, let's just play around with this just for a second. I'll get your question, Chris. So let's just say that we make it 15%. Ooh, that's not good. Okay, well, if we made it 15%, what happens?
The developer pays.
Well, the developer pays, or basically, there's not gonna be enough money to be able to pay the investor partner. They're not gonna be happy because the rate of return is not sufficient to be able to pay them, okay? All right, so, you know, let's say it's 12%. Nope, still 11%.
If you go down, if you bring it up a little bit, your return, your actual reversion is really good.
Yeah, the reversion is good, but yeah, your actual cash flow, not so much. Matter of fact, let me just kind of do this so we can kind of see everything all on one screen.
That's the way a lot of land deals are.
Okay, that's big enough where you guys can see it in the map. Okay, so once again, let's just say that once again we have 0. All right, so under that circumstance, take a look at what's happening. We go back to where there's no preferred return, and then we're giving basically every dollar that the project makes to the developer, and then the only thing we're getting on the back end of the deal is the amount that we put in. So therefore, we're just getting our money back as the investor. Now, we would never agree to that, of course, but it just sort of shows what impact that has. But also look at what this does to the developer's rate of return. They're getting a whopping 81% rate of return on the money that they've invested, and the overall project is still yielding that 17% that we had, you know, from up above, but it's just that the investor's not getting very much, okay? Okay, so now let's just go back here for a second. Well, let's just say that we make it a 50-50 distribution, okay, with no preferential return. Okay, so this is definitely not pari passu, because what we're saying is we're giving just simply half of the proceeds in terms of the before-tax cash flow to the developer, even though they've only put in $30,000 relative to $170,000, and we're getting basically 10% now, or $10,000 as well. So, but once again, look at the developer. The developer is getting a 46% rate of return. The investor's only getting a 10.6. But if they're happy, if the investor is happy with a 10.6% rate of return, you know, the developer's probably going to be very happy with this. It can be a very workable deal. Okay, but the investor maybe is not so happy, and they want a preferential return up here. Maybe they want a 5% pref. All right, so that kicks up, obviously, the percent that they get here, and then you can see it still is giving the developer a decent rate of return, still giving them a decent rate of return. Yep.
When you say preferred,
All that means is they get paid first,
they get paid first off the top.
off the top.
Okay.
So no matter what, they're making 5% off the top.
As long as it's bringing in.
Whereas without having it off the top and doing it just the 50-50, it does.
Yeah, it doesn't even be, like, for example, we go back up here, we make this 0,
Right.
and then we could say, all right, we're going to make it, the investor, they put in 85%, now we're back to kind of almost where we were. That's basically pari passu,
Right.
okay?
But you add that preferred just if that's how they want to structure the deal?
Yes, because they're just simply saying, think of it like this. You come to me and you say, okay, well, what sort of rate of return do you want on the money that you put into this investment? And I simply say, all right, I want 5%.
Okay.
But above and beyond that 5%, I want 50-50,
I got you.
okay? So I'm at least at a minimum getting my 5%, and then above and beyond that, we'll split everything 50-50.
I follow.
Okay. So that, the percentage on the preferred returns based on their equity, it's a percentage off of their.
Yes,
equity.
off of their equity.
Okay, okay.
So that
Not
5%,
not the cash flow, okay.
and then the 50/50, then that's how we end up with that number.
Got it.
Okay? But that split can be, you know, virtually anything that you can imagine. Okay? And it's just, but, and this is, once again, as I said, this is kind of still, it's a very basic sort of deal structure, but at the same time, it gives you sort of the framework, if you will, to be able to think of, okay, if that's how they're doing, that's what they mean by this whole preferred return and leftover distribution, whatever, then you can kind of begin to think, how can we modify this? How can we basically expand it, you know, to having, I mean, multiple developers, multiple investors, multiple lenders, and different payouts for each one of them, depending, you know, I mean, there's an infinite way of, like I said, structuring this, but this at least introduces you to kind of a fundamental framework. Whenever people start talking about deal structure, you have a clue of what they're talking about. And when they say, okay, I'm going to give you a preferred return of 8%, now you understand, okay, that's coming off the top. Or they say, well, this is pari passu distribution. Oh, I know what that is now, okay? And the first time I heard that, God knows how many years ago, what the hell are you talking about? Pari passu? What is that? You know, and I had to look it up, because I had no clue. You know, I don't know how many years ago that was, but it was just kind of like, but yet you hear a lot of developers, you know, they sit around there talking about this stuff, and, yeah, we got the pari passu distribution, and I was just like, you know, but it's one of those things. It's just, you know, common terminology. Okay? Question, comment, observation, somebody? Anybody? Yep.
So, after this class, right, when we're out in the real world, and we're looking to source different stuff like this, I've looked for this kind of stuff. Stuff's hard to find. At least for like a lay person. Whenever you're looking to source, to build out structures, is this something that you'd source from like, and I'm talking professionals, we can source this from attorneys,
Not necessarily, I mean, you know, I mean, Argus developer actually has the ability to do this very thing, okay? You know, you may not have known what you were doing whenever you were doing it, but this is, you know, part of what the waterfall of distributions that you can sort of set up. You know, any structure that you can, once again, pretty much imagine in terms of the ownership side of things. Because, you know, once again, every person is bringing in something a little bit different. Okay.
Is there a term for when it's not pari passu?
No, not really. I mean, it's more of, it's just a, because I mean, it's just going to be whatever the structure is that you come up with. So, I mean, it's just, it's like non-pari passu, you know, but it's just, but in essence, it's just going to be whatever the arrangement is that you're able to come into an agreement with all the partners in the arrangement.
What if you have multiple investors?
Then you just simply gotta just add more columns, and do the math. You know, and figure out, once again, what are they contributing, when are they contributing, how much are they contributing, what sort of rate of return do they get, when do they get paid? You know, all of that's, you've gotta determine it.
But this is a simple way to go to somebody and that you know that has the funds that you want to do a deal with. You're bringing all the knowledge, you're bringing the deal, you're bringing all the, and then they say, oh, wow, it's a great, you know, and you kind of minimize it, and then they get a return.
Right.
That they're not getting anywhere else.
Right, and you're getting paid. I mean, that's the thing, that you know, at least with this one, you're not getting paid a whole lot of money, but you're getting paid, you know, a significant return on your investment. But, you know, once again, this is a 5-year deal. And it's a relatively small dollar amount deal. So, okay?
Have you done them like this where you're not paying for all of it yourself up front and you're structuring them?
Oh, yeah.
Because see, for me, I'm a broker.
Let me just put it this way. Partners in deals can be challenging because part of it is trying to determine what each person really does bring to the table.
Right.
And, you know, my own personal experience is, you know, there's some people I have partnered with on deals, and it's been a wonderful, tremendous experience, and you can really see, yeah, they bring that to the deal, they bring that to the deal, and everybody's happy, and we're making money, and everything is great. And then other situations you get into, and you're like, what is this loser doing? You know, I mean, am I getting, you know, any benefit from their participation in this at all? And, you know, really questioning, you know, the value, you know, of that person, you know, in the process. So, you know, it's not like an easy, straightforward sort of thing. You really have to, you know, figure out what everybody truly is bringing into the process.
Oh, what I was gonna say was, in being a broker, I've made a lot of people a lot of money. And at first it was more like, okay, I'll do it to learn the business. But then now, the more I get into it, I've made more people money, and then they just think they could get it off of me for being a broker, but they're using my brain to make this stuff happen. So like right now I have a possibility of picking up a 7,000 square foot building. It's a family-owned retail strip center.
Yep.
And the son wants to take it over because the dad wants to retire. He thinks it's worth a buttload. I sat down with the son and I said, it's not worth what your dad wants, and money needs to be put in it. The guy has the money to buy his dad out of it, but he wants me to pretty much do the project for him and give him all the information. And I'm here thinking like, that's not cool. You don't have the time. You want me to do this. I think I need to present more of this. But where I get caught in it is they're looking at me as a broker saying, well, this is just information you should be giving me. And it's like, what broker do you know that's giving you this information? So that's, I see this and I see where I can make a whole lot of money as opposed to just a brokerage fee.
Right.
But it's presenting it now and being able to shift the mindset of
Absolutely.
broker to.
No, it's a very, very different mindset, you know,
Right.
from the brokerage sales aspect to, you know, really being able to understand, you know, what you have to do to be able to structure the deal so that once again, you can earn a return off of the project as opposed to, you know, simply off the sale or the leasing of the project.
And do you still, when you have structures like that, you're still paying an agent to be able to lease it and sell it?
Sure. Yeah, so
Yeah, but you would be giving up,
Right.
you would be getting, you don't get both.
But that's
You're
the
either a
thing.
partner or you're a broker, you never
Well,
get
you know,
both.
and
It's very seldom.
Yes, but no.
Yeah.
No, and there's one point I will disagree with you a little bit. I mean,
And nobody likes that though.
yeah, and I don't disagree with that. Because I've had a couple of partners in the past that had been, you know, brokers and you know, and it gets into this whole thing, but they usually bring something else to the table beyond just the brokerage skills, you know. But at the same time, yeah, it does get a bit frustrating because you're saying you're sort of double dipping, you know, in terms of the project.
Yeah, but sometimes you might bring some equity in, so you're like, I brought the deal, I brought some equity, and then you have to lease it somehow.
Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes, you know, the value of the broker is they find the deal. And they find a deal that is maybe off-market deal, or is just about to enter the market, or whatever it might be, and all of a sudden, you know, opportunities abound.
And a lot of times that brokerage fee can be like for equity.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's see, what else? Okay, any other questions? Okay, any other just sort of general questions about anything? About the project, we'll talk about that a little bit. All right, so once again, next week, what are you gonna be doing, okay? We can talk about the morning project a little bit, and we'll talk about the afternoon project. The morning project, how much success are you having in putting together your, let's say, 10 PowerPoint slides and kind of condensing everything down to that and being able to present the information from the spreadsheet that I gave you? Yes, good, bad?
There's a good bit of that I'd like to weed out, just because I think it clouds the presentation of the information.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Well, if it makes sense to weed out because you don't think it's relevant, or you don't think, what?
Well, certainly if they're blank, it's not relevant. So, there's cells
Yes.
that are blank.
Okay, yes, that one I would agree on.
Well, there's a few that are filled in, that just are, you know, I see repeats
Just
of on
irrelevant
page
to the
2 that
whole-
are on page 1.
Yeah, no, I would agree. That's also, once again, part of what you hopefully are able to maybe consolidate into something. I mean, what I'm hoping for in my dream world, you know, and I know that it's, you know, that it probably won't happen, but I'm gonna just hope that it does, is that at least one person or one group has managed to come up with some super slick, visible, you know, aesthetically pleasing slides that make it easy for everyone to understand precisely how the deal was put together and what the returns are. You know, that's what I'm hoping for.
Professor, what I did is I Googled to see what everybody else does with and I gotta tell you, if you have a really good format, you could publish it, because if you Google for an hour, but if you keep Googling, there is no good PowerPoints for financials. There is zero, and it says it in all the data from other professors that it's really a struggle to get. So that's what I kind of used that as my guide, because there are no good ones. So if you ever that's your whole purpose, is to come up with a really good alternative to all these numbers to get right to the facts. If you Google, you know, the best financial PowerPoints, there's not really any good ones out there, because it's just not available.
You know, but every pro forma is different, right?
They are. There's no question about it. But
kind of looking for one that fits all.
Well, it's not that you're looking for a pro forma that fits all. You're looking for a representation of the data from the pro forma.
Yeah, the numbers will change, it's just the visual that's not changing.
Yeah.
Because the numbers,
Yeah, a visual that fits all.
right, because the numbers are gonna be pulled from your actual spreadsheet, this is just the visual, right? And then
Right.
this correctly?
Right.
It's just the visual that you're taking from your spreadsheet and you're translating over to this presentation. So it could be a spreadsheet for a hotel, it could be a spreadsheet for a medical, you're just literally saying cap rate, vacancy, whatever factors you want.
I wanted to take the spreadsheet and link it to the PowerPoint file, but because it's CCIM, like proprietary, I can't do that, right?
You can try.
You can do it in an Excel file, but you can't. That way, if you change the spreadsheet,
Right.
the PowerPoint slide automatically.
PowerPoint still takes too long.
Now, what you could do is you could recreate portions of the CCIM spreadsheet in Excel on your own, and then create a link from that. So in other words, you're only populating those fields that are relevant that you want to include in your, I mean, once again, that's not part of the assignment, but yet you can do that, is what I'm saying. Okay? Yep.
So, I know the reason it's not in there is because it's before tax, but in a later class, will we touch on?
Yes. After tax.
And
Investments class.
yeah, and the distributions of.
Yeah. So, once again, you know, the structure of how, when you talk about real estate finance and real estate investments, they're two different things. Real estate finance is the debt side of the business. Real estate investments is the equity side of the business. And so typically, most real estate programs, when they teach these two classes as separate classes, you typically sort of focus on the real estate finance class, everything down to before tax cash flow, and then everything after before tax cash flow in the real estate investments course, because that gets specific to the individual investor in terms of income taxes for capital gains or accumulated depreciation or whatever else that you may have to sort of be individual with respect to what those tax rates are and how the flow through goes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Other questions, comments?
The numbers don't mean anything in the presentation part of it.
Well, they should be the same numbers as what are on the spreadsheet.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
How much time do you present?
I would say probably no more than 10 minutes.
Per person?
Yeah. Well, no, because we're not, okay. Let's think about what you're popping up there. You're literally popping up pictures.
Right.
We're not concerned about the numbers because the numbers are all the same.
Right.
All we're doing is we're just simply saying, ooh, we like your pretty PowerPoint slides, and yes, you're conveying the information in an effective way. So it's not going to take that long to sort of say, you've got really ugly PowerPoint slides that convey nothing, and the font's way too small, and the backgrounds are horrible, and okay, no presentation for you, you know, and move on.
How do we hook up our computers to this?
Okay, good
What are the
question.
dimensions of that?
So here's what I would suggest that you do both for the project, obviously in the morning as well as one in the afternoon. Just bring a jump drive,
Yep.
and we're gonna plug it into probably either one of these machines. We've actually, this machine has got it set where you can plug in the jump drives right here.
Oh, cool.
Okay, that machine, we can also plug it in there. We could actually have two different ones going at the same time, so that to kind of be expedient, one group could be setting up while the other one's presenting and vice versa, so that we could have the screen pulled down and be reasonably efficient with that. But just bring a jump drive. Don't bring your laptop, please. I mean, you can bring your laptop, but in terms of trying to plug it in and everything, I would rather not do
External
that.
hard drive.
Yeah. Okay?
If we want to look at our presentation, how it currently looks, can we plug our machine into that cable?
Or once again, just take the jump drive and plug it in, right here.
No. Same, okay.
Okay? All right? Other thoughts, comments, observations?
The most relevant data.
Okay, now, much like I mentioned in the morning class, course evaluations. Okay, so for this course, we have 27 So basically, we have 27 people in this course. If all 27 people fill out the course evaluations, you get 5% overall added to your final course grade. And then whatever basically roughly about 90% is of that. What's 90% of 27? 25-ish?
Yeah.
Somewhere around there?
It's about 24.
What?
We can call it 24.
Yeah, 24.
25. All right, and then 76% of 27 is
Right,
what?
that was right when.
Pull this.
I'm just gonna round down, you don't want my numbers.
Okay, 0.76 times 27, so basically 20 people.
Where's the course evaluation?
You should have been sent a link.
Oh, yeah? Oh, I think yeah.
Probably one of those emails that you just automatically delete or do something else with.
Yeah, pretty
If you
much.
did it, can you go back in that link and then?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Somehow, some way, it's gonna prove it to me, that's all I'm asking. Just prove
Well,
it
how
to
do
me.
you want it submitted? Just email? or-
Email's fine.
Okay.
Of course, evaluation. Not doing it right now. I already did yours. No, I'm just saying, make sure that you send me the proof, and then that's the way that we're gonna deal with it, okay? All right, I think most everybody's here. Is everybody not here today? Let's see, for 27 people.
Whoever's not here, let's
1,
contact
2,
them.
3,
Right, where's
4,
the-
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. So all 27 of you are here.
Oh,
All right? So if one of you doesn't fill it out, or two of you don't, or, yeah, two of you don't fill it out, then obviously it's 3%. So if you want that 5%, you need to get some peer pressure and make sure everybody fills that thing out. All right. You don't have to do it right now. I don't need to.
26 people that fill it
So
out.
who's in charge of making sure,
There's only 26 people that fill it out. What happens?
Go down.
Well, no, if it's below 27, it's going to be 3%.
Okay, so we just need to make sure we beat up that person.
Yes.
And we just send you a screenshot, right?
That's all I need. Okay? All right.
Still 2% difference.
Yeah, it could be me.
All right. All right. Any other sort of questions? Anything else you wanted to know or are afraid to ask before we do the final quiz for this?
How many Red Bulls do you drink?
hey, if we guessed that right, can we get another 5 points, sign it off?
On a teaching roll,
I just didn't want to say it.
Have you ever considered sugar-free? It's better.
someday, yes, my heart will explode and, you know.
I hope we're not here. I hope we're not
All
here.
right, other questions you want to ask?
You're shutting down 911.
I've always wondered. And
Is that real? I just started thinking.
Yeah, okay, for the morning presentations, all you're doing is just showing the PowerPoint slides for basically the data, okay? And you're just gonna kind of boop through those, okay? Those should go, like I said, very, very quickly because it'll be easy for us to visually, okay, yeah, you've got everything there, yeah, it looks very nice, or no, it doesn't, and done, okay? Now the afternoon session, now I've tracked it for seconds, but the afternoon session, totally different. The afternoon, you know, it's definitely all about the content and about the presentation as well. So for the afternoon, questions?
So for the afternoon one, it's gonna be like interactive.
Yes.
Don't necessarily, it has to be visible, but it's not, like, we're gonna be able to go.
It's gonna be all spreadsheet based.
Right, it's gonna
I
probably
don't
be like
need,
one
I
or
don't,
two
I don't need any PowerPoint slides.
Right, no, yeah. It's gonna be
So, yeah, and I don't expect that you need to do any handouts or anything else. You know, it's just pretty much pop it up on the screen. And what we might do is at the end of all of it, we find one or two of the models that everybody just falls in love with, and we'll maybe send them out to everybody. But the afternoon one is really, I want you, as Woody already said, there's some things that he had discovered in terms of some new Excel functions that he had never tinkered around with before, and this is your sort of opportunity to be able to sometimes maybe find some cool things and be able to show everybody else some of those cool things. Okay, all right. Anybody else?
My thing is that I'm just thinking about the project. There's gonna be somebody who's gonna, most people have a partner. It's gonna be someone will be on the computer, and you might be what happens if we change this number, and then we're just gonna have to discuss. But there's gonna be somebody going through, typing in, ideally for the presentation.
Yes. Yeah, and we can once again we can pop it probably on my machine on the jump drive, or we can just potentially load it on this machine. This machine has a full computer of its own, kind of behind the scenes where they're just to sort of show you. So we'll pull up, but you should be able just to plug in here, and then you can just use this, because this is actually a touch screen in and of itself.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't really use it that way because I'm using the touch screen on my own computer, but this is fully touch screen. Let's see here.
Yeah, and he writes.
That's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, it's a smart board, right?
Yeah.
Only the best for Nova South.
Only this room in the College of Business.
Yeah, I noticed.
Why do you think I wanted this room? Okay, but like with this,
Oh, I see. There's a keyboard. Okay.
Like a huge monitor.
yeah, and so you can go in, so
Oh.
pull up
So
Excel.
somebody doesn't necessarily need to be on the computer. They could be over.
Wait, so that's linked up as its own piece?
Yeah, this is its own PC now running in the background. It's back behind here. You just basically plug in your jump drive here, pull it up, and then you can, once again, pretty much do everything that you want to do.
That's pretty cool.
We all understand it's this real.
That's pretty
Everybody wants one of these for their home, don't we? Yes. I would
All I
love
remember
that.
is
Oh.
the smart boards from my elementary school. Those you have to plug into.
All right. All right, any other, yeah,
What's the governing documents?
What do you mean?
For the JV, is it gonna be within the, operating?
the partnership agreement,
Okay, it's a partnership agreement.
yeah,
That's where you lay out all of.
yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Lay out all the what?
Well, if you're doing any of the deal structure, it's gonna be in the partnership agreement as to who gets paid, when they get paid, how much they get paid,
Okay, good.
Like CMBS is the offering circular.
yeah.
That's where we talk. I mean, is pro rata exactly the same as the Latin term, or what I assume is Latin term to you?
To a certain extent, yeah. And I'm sure there's probably some minor difference I'm not just inherently thinking of, but in essence, yeah. Okay. All right, any others? Okay, and actually we can, just I wasn't even thinking about it, but you can actually, while we're doing this, same thing for PowerPoints.
In the law class, will we go over,
Like a little portion.
those guys?
Yeah. Ran away up there.
So basically this is like a blank PowerPoint slide, but obviously it could be a filled-in PowerPoint slide, but you can go down here, click on the little pen thing. Okay, on just a regular PowerPoint slide. So whenever you're presenting, whatever PowerPoint slides that you come up with for the morning class, you can have those pulled up, and then you can write on top of them, and so just another little feature. Okay? Okay? I do feel like that, Mike. Okay, yeah, question.
Current price is $5,500.
For one of these?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
That's not bad at all.
Should.
Looks like it's about 85.
So the question was, in the law class, do you go over partnership agreements, contracts, that sort of thing? And the simple answer is yes, you should. And the instructor for that class is a very applied guy, David Weissman. He's a new person that's teaching for us starting this year. Steve Genestra is retired. And I'm really excited about him starting up in the spring. So those of you that are taking classes in the spring, if you haven't looked at the schedule, you will see me again, obviously the first 8 weeks, but only in the morning sessions. Okay, from 8 until 12 for the real estate investments course. Okay.
Does that, when you point a laser at it, like one of those laser pointers, does it hide into it? Like, can you see it or can you not?
That I don't know. Don't know.
Is the
If anybody has
internship,
one, you can try it and see, but I don't know.
is internship only offered in winter, or is that?
No, internships can be done anytime over the course of the year, but now keep in mind with an internship, a lot of people don't fully understand this, is you're still registering for a 3 credit hour class that you're paying tuition for. Okay? And then you're working, while paying tuition. Usually the only people that I truly advise to do the internship option are international students that need the curricular practical training or occupational sort of practical training and aren't allowed to work in the country otherwise. Because if you're already allowed to work here, to me, doing an internship, you can just go ahead and get yourself a job. And not pay the tuition is my point. And take a class instead.
I gotta keep the job I have.
Oh, understood. Okay, all right. Any other questions? So this is for our last chance to sort of deal with question and answers. Next week will be purely, once again, your presentations. After those are done, then we're done, okay? Yep.
I heard something about the trip that you're doing.
This year, well, we're doing a trip to Cuba, but it's not a real estate focused trip. It's an entrepreneurship focused trip. That's why I didn't really invite a lot of people to go, because it's more from what was a real estate focused trip to where it's now more of an entrepreneurship focused trip. And really didn't see the relevance to a lot of folks going. We've got like 36 people going that are predominantly entrepreneurship folks.
Do a lot of entrepreneurship folks.
Where are you going?
No, it just happened that we're in the same division as entrepreneurship folks, and I had started a real estate study tour several years ago, and then the entrepreneurship folks sort of jumped in, and the next thing I know, then they sort of began to kind of dominate the group, and so we've since gone with entrepreneurship. So that was that. Okay? Anything else? Other final questions about
One
anything?
more question.
Yeah.
When's the next time development 2 will be?
Summer.
Summer.
Yeah, and we're doing a little bit different format this year. I'm going to be the one teaching it, and it's going to basically what it's going to be. Development 2 will be, you're going to be given kind of a project at the beginning of the summer, but we're not going to meet for that class until the second half of the summer. So the first half of the summer, the first 8 weeks, you'll be in the land use law class with Peter Hinn and the financial concepts and analysis with San Miguel. And then the second half, the second 6 weeks, you'll be meeting with me for basically the development process 2 course, along with the e-portfolio and MSRED comprehensive exam. Okay? It's a little bit different than last year's. Okay? All right? Anything else? Okay, let's do a little quiz. Again, just write your answers on the sheet itself. Okay, so the question is, if those are your last 2 classes, can you still graduate in June? The simple answer is yes, because walking the stage is not graduating to
I can tell you that.
So it's one of those things that as long as you are within the last few hours of your coursework, they'll let you work, because they only have one graduation a year in June.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah. In terms of walk the stage graduation, you know, but like, for example, if you're graduating this semester, you're gonna get your diploma, you know, a few weeks after the semester's over. Yeah.
So that means you need to apply before December.
Right, yeah, you apply and pay $100. That's all. It's your, you put your name in, you pay $100.
I started with.
That's it. What's that? What's that?
But I think we all.
You applied during the last semester, then you're in.